Hey everybody, it's me CrystalMan2000, and welcome to the final video of Ace Attorney Month, the review for Spirit of Justice. I'm sorry that I didn't get this out as planned, but I was really busy, I had other things to do, I still had to play the game completely, and I really tried to write a script. However, time just didn't permit it for me, and I wasn't able to get the review out on time. However, now that the game has been out for almost a month, I thought of maybe instead of doing a full-on formal review, I was going to kind of give my final thoughts and we could have a couple discussions in the comments below. So this is going to be a bit more of a casual video, I hope you guys are okay with that. I'm not usually used to these types of things, so we'll see how it goes. Also, this should be pretty evident, but this is going to be more of my impressions of the game now that I've completed it. If you have not played Spirit of Justice, there will be spoilers in this discussion, so you may want to steer clear of this. Go play the game. It is very good, a worthy successor to Dual Destinies in my opinion, and it's really good. There's no other words to describe it. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking about the story. I'm not going to bring any build-up or intro. I'm just going to go straight on what I liked about it. So first off, the location, the Kingdom of Wright. I really liked this place. I thought it was a very interesting location. It had a lot of diversity among it. It had this very foreign feel to it, and I liked that a lot. I like it when games try to bring you into this not-so-familiar world, but make it in a way that seems believable. There's so many details among all the environments, like the bazaar and the warbird bird, like there's so many other delicacies that are throughout this entire place, and it really brings the kingdom alive. Like, it makes it feel real. While we're at it, we should talk about the big issue in the room being the Defense Culpability Act. That's the big thing that makes the Kingdom of Wright so different from the normal court system. It added a lot of intensity to the trials, and I thought it made this trials feel a lot more personal, since you were also at the helm and you were equally about to get guilty verdicts. And I'm pretty sure every single case has a guilty verdict given to you in Wright, which is god insane, considering I can only think of like 3 cases where you got guilty verdicts on purpose. I think Turnabout Goodbyes, Farewell My Turnabout, all those ones. But I thought, overall, the Kingdom of Wright, I really liked it. I loved so many of the interesting witnesses there. I think the only problem I had with the thing overall was the pun names on all of the characters. I thought they were very off-putting. It didn't feel like a natural name. It felt more like the translation team was just like, here, let's just make this phrase sound as foreign as possible with the way we spell it. And I thought it was really lazy in some areas. There were some names that I thought were really funny, like Trust in Me, Believe in Me, and then eventually their child, Faith in Me. I thought those were really good puns, and they kind of felt a little more natural, especially since they had similar last names. I think they made those ones work very well. But ones like That's Horrible, considering how big of a role he has, I don't think his name could have fit the kind of role he ended up playing later in the game. And while we're at it, there's also another thing that this game, Spirit of Justice, brings in, and that's the Divination seances, and I thought they were really well done. I can't exactly recall how many there are, but the ones that really impressed me specifically were the first one. They had a lot of detail in them. I think some of the puzzles in the early ones and the first one in the Foreign Turnabout, I thought it was a little bit too difficult, especially the one with the lights going out. It was very hard to tell considering we haven't seen one before that, but the Wright for Turnabout and Turnabout Revolutions, both of those had really good divination seances, especially the first one with Trust in Me, and I really liked the final one with Apollo's dad. It actually kind of somehow brings out the name Spirit of Justice, specifically Jove Justice. And while we're on that, let's talk about the characters in this game. So, there aren't too many new characters. I can really only think of 4 specifically new ones that are important overall to the plot, one of which isn't even that useful for most of the game, so let's just go one by one. First off, Apollo. This is Apollo's game. Dual Destinies was mainly Athena's game, with maybe a little bit more emphasis on Phoenix because it was him finally getting back into the shoes after 7 years. This game focuses right on Apollo, and it's a great conclusion to the, what I'll call, after trilogy with Apollo Justice, Dual Destinies, and Spirit of Justice. It wrapped up his entire story. They have a lot of different elements that help kind of tie everything together, such as who his father was with Jove Justice, where he was in the Kingdom of Wright, and the way he grew up, and it added something to his character that I think very few games were able to make me change how I felt about a character from one game to the next. Now, I wouldn't say I would necessarily put Apollo above. I think he still needs a little bit more personality overall, but I definitely liked what they did with this character. I thought his backstory was done very well, and the way they wrap his finale up of staying in Kurion to fix basically the entire legal system, I thought that was done very, very well, and I'm interested to see where the series is going to go next now that Apollo's not really going to be in the mix that much. And while I didn't say I loved Apollo, he was definitely important to the chemistry, especially the banter that he has with Athena. However, there are some other characters that did kind of get the cheapskate. The two big ones that come to mind, Athena and especially Maya. Athena only appears in 2, or really 3 cases in the game, but she's shortchanged in cases 2 and 5, especially since you're not playing as her, and she just doesn't get any credit for the 4th case because of how useless it is to the overall plot. I'll talk about that when I start talking about the cases more in depth, or what I liked and disliked about each one of them, but after all the development they had with Athena, I felt as though they didn't keep bringing on her character like they did with Apollo in Dual Destinies. Like, they were still able to get Apollo to have all of the moments that made him great in Dual Destinies, like going against Athena. And I thought that was really well done in that game, but I felt as though they kind of just got rid of Athena and just said, we have to keep her in here because, well, she's part of the team now, and I didn't like that. I'm so sad that they shortchanged Maya, though. She really is only in Case 3. I don't even know if she's in Case 5, but the only case she actually has importance is Case 3. And while I didn't necessarily hate Case 3, I didn't think that she deserved to be in this game. I thought it would have worked better if they got a new character to work with Phoenix. Now, definitely it makes more sense for why Phoenix is coming to Kurion now that Maya is there, and I definitely love seeing Maya grown up, and some of the banter that she has with Nick about, like, they end up having this tiny little conversation about ladders and step ladders. It brings back so much nostalgia for me, and I know for a lot of other fans, and I thought that part specifically was very well done. But for being such an important part of the entire game of, we want to bring Maya back, it just felt kind of like an afterthought, being, yeah, let's bring Maya back, and let's do it right. But I didn't think that they could have... I can't think of many ways they could have expanded upon this, but I thought they could have done it in a much better way, or maybe given her more importance, especially in the final case. And I argue the first case. You could have brought her in for the first case. But yeah, that doesn't mean I hated all the characters in this game. There were still some that I really, really liked. I'm going to go down my 3 favorite characters from the entire game, especially new characters. I'm going to specifically talk about new characters. So number 3 is definitely got to be Nayuta Zanmahi. He's the new prosecutor of the game, and I thought he was decent. I really liked what they did with him in Turnabout Revolution. I thought his character arc in that case alone was very well done. However, I felt for the majority of the game, he was kind of lackluster. He definitely had his moments, like when he throws the rosary bead and tries choking them and all that. I thought that was really well done. I think some of the lines he ended up having were really, really well. Something about hangnail hell, I thought that was really entertaining. But overall, I didn't feel as though they made his character feel like anything in those first few cases. He really doesn't get any character development until the final case. Whereas someone like Simon Blackquill, Clavier Gavin, Godot, Edgeworth, they all have so much more emotion and so much more personality in cases that they're not necessarily in. And even then, they still have character development. Like, especially Godot, Edgeworth, maybe not Clavier as much, but definitely Simon. I thought they all worked really well as they progressed through the game, but Nayuta just felt like he was there for the sake of having a new prosecutor there, and if they included him in just the final case, I would have been completely fine with it, but I thought it was meh overall, but I definitely enjoyed him as a character. Now, the second character that I liked a really lot is Padme Ray Fa. I really, really liked her. She had this bit of kiddiness to her when she always called someone Nincompoop and Barbed Head and Hornhead and all that. I thought it made her character very interactive, and she really develops herself throughout the entire game, unlike Nayuta. Like, she grows to see that the divination seances actually help prove who the real person is, and she feels so bad for all these false convictions she could have been getting just because no one bothered to argue with her divination seances, and I thought that was really well done. And like, the emotion that she has with Garon at the end of the case, and the emotion that she has with her true mother, Amare, I think is what her name is. I thought that was really well done, and I thought I would love to see how, like, if they somehow brought her back in previous games, like maybe Apollo, if the game was like Apollo fighting in Kurion, I would love to see her again. I thought she was really well done. I also really loved her movements. She just, like, she had so much life within all of her, and I loved her movements, especially with all the jokes she had with Nena, or aka Amare. I thought that was really well done, and I would definitely love to see her again, see how she develops among, now that she has a different opinion of the law, and especially now that she knows who her real mother is. And here we go, drumroll please! My favorite new character that they brought in Spirit of Justice was Durk. Durk may only be in the final case of the game, but I loved him for every single moment. He always had this charm to him. He was always excited. He was adventurous. He was always willing to do whatever he wanted. That epic voice of just going, "A dragon never yields." That was really awesome. I thought he was really cool. He had a lot of personality. He definitely felt real, and the way he interacted with Apollo felt so real, and it makes it so heartbreaking when you figure out that he died. And that's one of those moments that I loved about that case, because it's something that I had suspicion of once they started mentioning it, but I never wanted to say it, because Durk was just so great of a character that I didn't want to know that he was dead. And any game that was able to make me feel, I think this is personally, the most emotional death in the series. Yeah, you have characters like Mia, and you do occasionally have some characters in later games. Specifically for Apollo, you have Clay Turan, but I think personally, the character's death who I think was the most impactful right now in the series has to be Durk, because you grow to love him through this case, and then just that car ramming into you, hearing Durk is dead, is just heartbreaking, and you don't get to see him anymore in the series or the game after that. Unlike Mia, who you see throughout the rest of the game, and so many other characters. I thought all they did with his character was really well. He had a lot of charm. I loved the plot twist with him, and overall, I think he might be my favorite inclusion, despite only being one part of the entire game as a whole. Before I start going into each case individually, I'm going to talk about a little other things I had some problems with the game. First off, it has similar issues to what I had with Dual Destinies, being that investigations were a little dumbed down. They were definitely better in this game than I would say in Dual Destinies, but I think the investigations, where you're actually investigating the crime scenes, were a lot more intriguing in Dual Destinies rather than this game. Because all of this stuff is kind of traditional, not really technological, I didn't find them that interesting to explore, and many of the characters I thought could have been more interesting, specifically in their investigations. However, it wasn't a huge problem with me, and I still thought they were fine. Second big issue I have with this game was washed out mechanics. Once again, a similar problem I had with Dual Destinies. There are so many mechanics in this game that they have to use. They have to use the Moon Matrix, they have to bring that back in, and then they have the Cyclops, and then they have Apollo's perceivability, but they still have to get the Divination seances in there. Oh, and by the way, let's also add in the revisualizations, and I don't even know what else they added, but they added so much, and at this point, I think this series needs to start dropping mechanics. So good thing is that they'll most likely be dropping the perceivability now that Apollo's gone, unless they really want to bring it back with Trucy. But I think this could be a good step in the series of getting rid of some of the mechanics a little more. I did like how the Divination seances weren't as tedious as, say, the Mood Matrix. I still loved the Mood Matrix from Dual Destinies, don't get me wrong, but they definitely used it way more often than they should have or needed to. However, I think the Divination seances had the right amount of necessity. Like, you always needed those cases in it, and what I mean by that is that they were actually essential to solving the case, and they actually felt natural, especially because of the rules you were restricted with. However, all the other mechanics, Cyclops, I can't even remember any of the Cyclops, because I think one's a tutorial, and the second one, I don't even know if there was a second one. Perceivability, I thought some of the ticks were a little lame. The Moon Matrix is used, I think there's only like 4 contradictions involving the Moon Matrix, which is so sad, and they could have done a lot more potential. I think they did it very well in Case 4, especially with Unito, but overall I didn't like what they did with it. The revisualizations, I thought they were decent overall. I definitely liked more of the revisualizations from Dual Destinies, but I think the style was better in this game, but the plot twists were a little lacking. The final case, and definitely the Magical Turnabout, I thought those had really good visualizations, but other cases, they were okay. I kind of predicted some of them, but that's about it. Okay, now that that's done, let's go into what I think about each case individually. So first off, we have the foreign turnabout, the first case of the game. Honestly, it is jumped off the chart as one of my favorite first cases, along with Turnabout Trump, Turnabout Memories. Is it Turnabout Memories or Turnabout? I always get those two cases confused. The first case of Trials and Tribulations. It's definitely up there for one of my favorites. The thing that pieced it together for me was I'll be your guide. I thought the chemistry he had with Phoenix and the way that he developed throughout the case, I thought that was very well done. And it was a great introduction to this foreign land, not just throwing you straight into a courtroom system to try to teach you. It gave time to allow you to learn the characters. And the second reason I loved this case, I don't know how to say his name, Pease Lubin Understandin. However you want to say his name, he is now easily, if I were to do that characters list again, and if I wanted to put another witness, I'm sorry, he's beating Robin under any circumstance. He was awesome. His breakdown was incredible. He had a lot of personality. I loved his rock tune, and I overall thought it was a really good case. I think the plot twist could have been a lot more interesting. I think they tied it. However, I did think they tied it very well to the rest of the game with the Founder's Orb and all that. I thought overall it was a very good case. It set a good base mark for what the game was trying to go for, and it definitely set up for later cases. Okay, then we move on to the second case, the Magical Turnabout. This one is probably my favorite non-final case in the series, or not the series, but this game specifically. With Defending Trucy, this is one of the few cases I can think of. I think this might be the only case in the series that's only one investigation and one, trial sequence long. But I don't think that's a bad thing. This case was really well done. I definitely loved a lot of the witnesses in this case, especially Bonnie and Betty. I thought those were really fun characters, and I definitely loved Roger Ratings. I thought the plot twists in that case were some of the best in the game as a whole, like the one when you finally piece together that Ratings is Mr. Reus. I thought that was really well done. It definitely brought back more of the Dual Destinies feel, where I feel you piece together all of this crime to just show this convoluted series of events that led to this crime on pinning it on Trucy, and I thought it was really well done, and it's one of the few cases where I think it makes sense for how convoluted it is, but it's warranted, but it's not convoluted enough that you can't follow it, and I thought that was very, very well done. Overall, I thought it was a very good case. I loved the witnesses. I thought the plot twist was interesting. It was convoluted, yet simple to understand, at least. And I think one of my favorite parts is how the gallery, always just nailed it on Trucy. That's another thing I loved about this game. The gallery had a lot more personality, especially the one in Ryan. They all had their own opinions. They all had their own beliefs. And especially the one in the Magical Turnabout. They all have their own opinions about it, and they feel like real people watching a court thing and making their own assumptions with it, not just purely just this group that's always going mumble, 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 mumble. I thought it added a lot more realism to all of this world stuff, all the world building. Okay, then we move on to the third case, which is the Wright for Turnabout. I thought it was a decent case, definitely not my least favorite in the game, but it could have been better in my opinion. There were parts that I really liked about it though. Once again, I love Maya, but I think they shortchanged her a little bit. I definitely love what they did with Ray Fa in this case, and especially with her interaction with Emma. However, there are some problems I have with this case. First off, I didn't like the witnesses that much. I didn't think Trust in Me was that interesting overall. That's Arable didn't work very well as a witness, I think. And Believe in Me didn't even do that much in the case for me, and I didn't have any personal drawing to her. I think she was a wasted potential for a character, especially with the amount of fun you could have with her just switching paintings. I thought they could have added a lot more fun, a lot more creativity to her character. However, it sets a very, very high bar for Turnabout Revolution. It definitely has a very interesting plot twist at the end with Trust in Me being a suicide. I thought that was very well done. I kind of predicted it a little bit, which I think was the other problem I had with this, is that it was very predictable. And the second problem I also remember about this case was that there were so many flashbacks in this case. And what I mean by that is that you would go into a testimony where you have to press every statement with Trust in Me, and you're basically... So before the testimony, you also get the flashback to Ray Fa explaining how spirit channeling works. And then you press the second statement, and then it flashes back to when Ray Fa is explaining you how spirit channeling works. It's very tedious, it's very unnecessary, it held your hand way too long. I definitely didn't hate the case, but it definitely could have been better in a lot of areas, but I wouldn't necessarily say I hated it, and it definitely didn't ruin the game for me. I definitely liked how they set up Dat's Arable. I thought he was an interesting character once we got down to it, but his courtroom interactions weren't that great. However, overall, I've really liked seeing how Phoenix and Nayuta interacted. I think that was some of Nayuta's best moments in the game overall, and I definitely liked the case, not necessarily my favorite in the game. Then we get to Case 4. Turnabout Storyteller. Oh my gosh, this case is just... It's a mess. Now, once again, similar to most people in the series, I don't hate very many cases in the series, like, even ones that people really hate, Turnabout Big Top, Lost Turnabout, all those. I don't hate them. Ace Attorney has always been very consistent with their cases, and even when they're bad per se, they still have some redeeming factors. However, I think this is one of the worst examples of filler in the entire series. Athena, she gets shortchanged so badly. She has no reason to be in her case. They kind of destroyed some of the character that they built up. I didn't think they had the same cheery personality. They gave her a much more serious tone to this case, and I didn't think that it deserved it. Second problem I had with this case was Black Quill. I didn't like what he did. I didn't like his interactions with Athena overall. He could have been a lot more cooler on the defense bench. I would even be so far to say I thought he was a lot more serious than he was in the previous games, and I definitely liked seeing him, how he interacted now that he was out of jail. But I think he didn't have any right to be in this case. He didn't need to be in this case at all. And then the biggest problem I have with this case is just the translation team just feels lame. In cases like Bridge the Turnabout, it kind of makes sense when everything kind of has this foreign feel to it because it's spirit channeling. It's not supposed to be something that's an American custom, so I was fine with them using the terms, but like the amount of things that they do in this case with Japanese culture just felt like the translation team wasn't trying to be a little more creative, like, oh, we got Taksoba and Undon Noodles and Raguko, and yeah, we're gonna have these pun names that I hope I'm not the only one who didn't understand. I understand Taifu Tornado, I understood that one, but I still don't understand Unido Tornado or I can't even think of the girl's name. That's the problem I had. So much of this case is forgettable. It's useless to the overall plot. I think they could have... I'll explain about this after it. I'm going to add some final thoughts to the game, but this case is honestly one of the only reasons this game isn't higher personally on my list, is because this kind of just destroys the pacing of the game. It has no reason to be in there. It destroys Athena's character, and except for Unido, there's nothing about this case that was memorable to me. And maybe what's her name's breakdown. I thought that was a very well done breakdown, but overall the case was very forgettable, very useless, and it had no right to be in this game. And then we get to the final case, Turnabout Revolution, easily my favorite case in this game. So it's kind of split into two cases in a way, and I'll talk about that later when I get to how I thought the game was structured, but the first half having to do with Paul Addison, I thought that was very interesting. It had a lot of intensity to it. Seeing Apollo go up against Phoenix, I thought that was really cool, very intense. I thought they made it feel realistic, especially with the entire Maya being blackmailed. I also really liked Sarge as a character, aka Army Buff. I thought she was very interesting. Her plot twist was very good. I thought her character was very interesting. I loved the interaction of her toy helicopter. That was really fun. And Paul Addison's breakdown at the end of the case, that was really well done. And like I said, its first investigation is really good, where you're looking for it. It doesn't feel like a murder examination, because it's not supposed to be a murder. It's supposed to be a civil case at first, and I thought that was very well done. And then we get to the second half involving the murder of Minister Inga. Once again, thought it was very well done. First off, the two divination seances with Judge Justice and Minister Inga, very well done. Also, I'm just going to say this right out there. Anyone who played 999 was able to predict what disease, prosopagnosia, however you say it, on Minister Inga. Answer in the comments below if I was the only person being able to predict that, but I played 999. I think that's mainly the reason, but it's definitely true, and it made it a little bit more obvious for me. I think the only problem I may have with this final case overall is Garon. I didn't think she added too much to the case. I think they could have made her being the villain a lot more subtle and a lot more interesting. However, overthrowing her at the end, that was awesome. That was badass. That was the stuff I wanted to see more of in this game, I think. But it was definitely good. I thought they could have done more things with her, and I thought they could have made her interactions, especially with Rayfa, a little more interesting. Don't get me wrong, the interactions she has with Rayfa were really well done. I like the way Rayfa wanted to go and keep doing these divination seances, but Garon knows how bad this is for her case, so she tries to avoid it. I think she just was too obvious for me, and for a final villain of the series, like, if you look at some of the final villains in the series, they are so good. Von Karma, Gant, Matt Ungard, Godot, all of those great villains are not predictable. Bobby Fulbright, that's another example. The Phantom. Any character you can see throughout the entire game, or at least through the final case, that you can't predict as the final villain, is really well done. And similar to Kristoff, I don't think Garon is that interesting because they make it way too obvious that she's the villain in the case. However, that definitely doesn't deter my love for this. Like I said, the plot twists are so good. I think the case is a little bit convoluted. I need to like double take myself near the end of the case to fully understand what was going on. And definitely there were a lot of aspects that felt rushed in a way in this second half of the case. It was once again, I don't hate this case. I thought it was very well done. I think they could have done more with Amara's character and how she interacted with Garon. I think they could have made a little more sense why Garon specifically wanted to murder Inga, because literally, Garon does nothing for this final part except to go and murder Inga, and then Amara does everything else. Like, it didn't make sense to me. The motive made sense, but the reason that she was the one who did the murder just felt odd. It didn't make any sense to me, but I did like some other plot twists with Amara being Nana. I thought that was very well done, and like I said, the character development for Rayfa, Nayuta, Durk, all of them, very well done. And I think the game ends on a very high note that was very unexpected and very interesting at the same time. The last thing I want to talk about this game is the way the game is structured. Now, overall, this is the biggest problem I have with this game. So, let's go back to Dual Destinies. Let me tell you what I really liked about Dual Destinies. Despite not being in chronological order, I would say it's one of the best structured Ace Attorney games ever, for 3 reasons. A, every case is important to the overall plot. B, they use it, even though it's in an unlinear fashion, it builds up the characters, especially Athena throughout all of it. And 3, the way they were able to change the characters you're playing as through the game was very well done. That is the biggest problem I have with Spirit of Justice, is its structure overall. Now, don't get me wrong. The first case, third case, and all of the final case, those are a perfect trilogy if you want to go through 3 perfect cases almost. Magical Turnabout doesn't really need to be in there. It kind of develops Paulo's character a little bit, and it introduces Nayuta. But like I said, that 4th case it destroys the entire speed of the game. One of the biggest problems I had with Dual Destiny's structure overall was that the Cosmic Turnabout and Turnabout for Tomorrow were 2 separate cases. Now, I definitely didn't want to add Turnabout Reclaimed in there because that case I think would have ruined the game a little more if they added it in. However, this game tries to basically do that. It doesn't try to split the final case into 2 parts, even though it makes so much more sense because there's 2 separate murders, they're almost 2 separate cases, and the only thing they have in common is having to do with the Founder's Orb and Maya and having to go to Kurayan, but they could have easily ended the case with the way they ended the first half of Turnabout Revolution. And one final note that I also didn't talk about was the soundtrack. There's not too many songs that stuck in my head. A Cornered Heart definitely stands out in my mind. I thought the Pursuit theme was kind of okay. Most of the soundtrack was just okay, but I think it could have been a lot better. I think it could have been a lot more intense, interesting, a lot more diverse. Diversity, I think, is the biggest problem with this soundtrack in this game. It didn't have enough. It had some intense tracks, but also had some emotional tracks, but they overall sounded the same, and I got some of the same emotions out of them, and I think it could have been better. They also replayed a lot of songs, especially the 2 character themes, 1 or 2 character themes. got very tedious by the end of the game, and it just I liked it when the games had different themes for different characters, or just in general where they played different themes instead of reusing so many, which I think is the biggest problem with this game, because it plays the pursuit theme so little and plays the objections themes way too much. Overall, the soundtrack's okay, but it was used very poorly in areas, and I think the soundtrack could have been better. Now, as I go for final thoughts, I'm going to basically recap what I thought about this game into the other countdowns I did during Ace Attorney Month. So, in top 10 songs, I would definitely put A Cornered Heart in there. Very intense, very thrilling. I loved some of the a cappella parts in it. Don't know where I would have placed it. Probably removed the Steel Samurai theme and placed it somewhere in that area. Very well done theme. Thought it was really good. Characters, if I were to replace one character, I would replace Robin and maybe put in Durk somewhere on the list. I don't know where I would put him. Probably above Sebastian somewhere. Definitely not above Ray, though. Overall, I thought so many other characters. Ray Fa could have definitely gotten on there. Don't know if Nayuto would have been able to get on there. Probably not overall, but definitely Durk and definitely Ray Fa could have gotten on there. And if I were to do another witness, I would definitely put Peace, Love, and Understanding on there instead of Robin. Top 10 cases, already talked about that. I would definitely put Turnabout Revolution up in the top 5 somewhere. Yes, I would really put it that high. Don't know what I would end up cutting in the end. Magical Turnabout would be probably the close second for getting onto the list, but even then, I think it would have been in top 15. And I definitely liked the Foreign Turnabout, but I don't think it was grand enough to be in something like the top 10 favorite cases in the series. And then the final note to end on. Where does this game place in the rest of the series? So as you know, I already ranked all the games in order, not including Spirit of Justice. But now that I've played the game, I'm still kind of flipping back and forth. It's definitely above Apollo Justice, Justice for All, Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright, and Investigations, in my opinion. I think the games that it's having trouble going against is Trials and Tribulations. And that's about it. I definitely would say I definitely like Dual Destinies as a package overall more than Spirit of Justice. However, I definitely like Spirit of Justice much more than Investigations. My opinions could fluctuate between Trials and Tribulations, but I think Trials and Tribulations has much more consistent cases than Spirit of Justice. Spirit of Justice, once again, the only problem I have with it is the fourth case, but it kind of destroys the entire pacing, and once again, the soundtrack, I think, was another thing that made this game a little bit worse for me. But overall, I thought it was a very good idea to kind of reboot the series in a way. Not reboot in the same way Dual Destinies did, but kind of reset it the similar way Trials and Tribulations did it. You have Apollo away now, so you can kind of focus on Phoenix, or especially Athena if you wanted to again. I definitely loved the Kingdom of Kurian. I thought many of the cases were interesting. I loved the characters, and the Divination seances were awesome. The problems I have with the game are the fourth case, the game structure, and the overall soundtrack, and some of the mechanics being washed out. But that's it. So you guys can say what you guys thought of the game in the comments below. I'll definitely try to comment and try to explain why I feel certain things if you guys thought I didn't clarify things, but I wanted to talk about this, and I'm sorry that it took so long for me to get this out, but once again, if you somehow watched this review and didn't play Spirit of Justice yet, first off, you probably shouldn't because I spoiled so much for you, but once again, go out, definitely get it. It's better than probably half the games in the series, in my opinion, but if you skip it, I wouldn't necessarily say you're missing anything until you get to the later games, but it's definitely very good. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!